Hello guys, welcome to the revision session on sociology. So here we will be looking at the middle class. Okay, so here we will be discussing middle class. This is mainly from paper 2. So you have agrarian class structure and then industrial class structure, and the third one is middle class. So we have covered both. So this is what we are going to discuss now. So see, we discussed a lot about middle class in paper 1 also, and we discussed a lot when we talked about Marx and then Weber. So we have seen the definitions and everything. So here also, when you write the introduction or when you define, after that you can, bring in Marxian understanding, Weberian understanding, right? Marxist understanding in terms of class and class consciousness. So you can define that way. And Weber is talking about, life opportunities and the status. And then you can also bring in John Urry, and based on workplace relationship, he defined middle class. Anthony Giddens defined in terms of education and technical expertise. And then there are definitions based on economic and statistical perspectives, and then economic benchmark based definitions. BB Misra's median salary analysis, and then also there is a generic understanding which is based on ownership and skilled labor. So these ways you can define. You can take a couple of thinkers, and I prefer mostly Max Weber and Karl Marx and Anthony Giddens. And if you want, you can go for a general definition also. So these are what I prefer when you define. And then, especially even if it is paper 2, don't think that you don't want to write about Marx and Weber. You need to write about the international thinkers also, and then you focus on Indian aspects. Okay. And that's very important, especially on topics like middle class, where significant discussions has been done by these thinkers. Already it is there in your syllabus and you have prepared. So then after that, you'll be talking about historical evolution of middle class in India, because the topic is middle class in India, right? You talk about the colonial period and then the post-colonial period, right? So colonial period, you discuss about education and administration as the catalyst. And then you definitely have to discuss about the reformers, especially Raja Ram Mohan Roy, K.C. Sen, and then Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. And then we discuss about post-independence period. We talk about impact of democracy, impact of land reforms, impact of green revolution. And then you discuss a post-liberalization era, where you talk about urban professionals and IT sector expansions and other things. Now, if you look at the perspective specific to Indian middle class, okay, then we need to discuss A.R. Desai. So initially, when we started off with, in the definition, we talked about, Max Weber and Karl Marx. But when we come specific to the answer, which is, related to middle class in India, we have to discuss A.R. Desai, and we'll discuss in terms of role in national movement and then the reforms. BB Misra in terms of colonial creation of intermediaries, and then Sadish Deshpande will discuss as hegemonic nature of middle class, and Andre Bette the transitional and contradictory values. So all these we can bring in, and then we need to discuss the evolutionary phase of Indian middle class, the evolution, the early colonial period, as the tax collectors and the westernization aspect you can mention, and then Indian Renaissance, that the modern education and the social reforms, right? And then post-independence growth, like the jobs and reservations and other thing, and then post-liberalization. You talk about urbanization, technocrats, and IT and everything. Okay, and then when we talk about middle class, you need to make a difference and divide between rural and urban middle class. Talk about the similarities like conservative and utilitarian ethos, and then differences like one is agricultural based and rural, the other is dynamic, which is urban middle class. Right. So, and then we discussed about rural, urban, now contemporary middle class. That's the features of what are the features of contemporary middle class, like consumerism and technological proficiency, number of suicides that you see, right, because of consumerist culture and other things. And then cultural duality, globalized and localized. That's what I mean by duality. Then agent of social change and the influence of media. So we can also talk about the socio-economic impact on middle class and of middle class. Then we focus on globalization and middle class. Guys, all these are independent questions also. They can ask you 10 markers from each of these topic. But in case if you are asked a general question, let's say 20 marker on middle class, all these areas need to be touched upon. So rise of globalization, and then middle class adaptation to it, and adaptation to the global trends, the challenges, the brain drain, and the denationalization concepts, right? And then the sociological perspective on homogenization and the cultural identity. So these elements need to be brought in, and what are the challenges and the criticisms, gender inequality and the superficial emancipation, right? And then the rising consumerism and the mental health concerns, the rising suicide tendencies, caste class tensions in middle class dynamics. So all these you need to mention. And sometimes they can ask you this question, I think was asked before, impact of COVID-19 on middle class, economic and social strains, gendered impact, of the pandemic, and then post-COVID recovery and adaptation, and all those need to be there. At least one line you can mention if it is a general question. Specific question at this point is not possible. That time is what we need to focus on. And then contribution of middle class as an economic driver, the consumption and entrepreneurship and how it promote growth and how they contribute, cultural influences in terms of media, social activism, social reforms and other things, and social stability and modernization agents, right? Again, role in driving the economic growth, as we discussed, impact on governance and policy formation, transition to stable and modern identity. And in conclusion, you can talk about synthesis of tradition and modernity, and middle class act as agents of social change. So my point here is I just want to cover so much of area in so less time to tell you if a question is asked in general on middle class in India for 20 marker, whatever is possible from whatever I have discussed, you need to cover. If the question is specific middle class in India, that is for 10 mark, then you define properly what is middle class, then talk about Marx and Weber argument. In definition, you can add Anthony Giddens also. And then you talk about the features and evolution and the challenges, and then you can wind up the answer if it is 10 marker. So it depends on the demand of the question, you need to plan it, right? And remember guys, this discussion that we are going to have now, this is just a revision session. I will not be able to cover all these. So much of content is there, so much of topic is there. So if you're looking for the classes, the details are given in the description. And in case if you're not looking for the classes, you just need the PDF and answers, that is absolutely free. You can again get it downloaded from the description which is given. So let's start with middle class. So you need to tell that the middle class plays a very important role, a pivotal role in shaping the socio-economic and cultural landscape of any society. And despite its extensive research, a universally agreed upon definition of the middle class remains elusive due to its diverse characteristics and interpretations. Okay, now coming to definitions and understanding of middle class. Different scholars. So I basically prefer Marx, Weber, and John, Anthony Giddens. Okay. So John Urry, if you want, I'll give you, you can mention that. PDF, I have given so many definitions. When we talk about Marx, emphasize the relationship with means of production. And according to Marx, middle class lacks the direct ownership of the means of production. And they align closer to the proletariat. And over a period of time, he predicted that the class polarization will happen and the middle class would dissolve and leaving only two classes. So that is bourgeois and proletariat. So according to Marx, there is a pyramidal structure. At the top, few capitalists, and at the bottom, so many, proletariat. In between, there is a middle class, that intermediate class. So according to him, over a period of time, this intermediate class either will polarize into the upper class or the lower class, that is bourgeois or proletariat in terms of bourgeoisization or proletarianization. But this is a criticism also of Marx. Instead of this triangle structure, what happened? Middle class have widened. Okay, that's a criticism. But when we talk about understanding of class, middle class, we'll discuss this. Coming to Weber. Weber introduced a more nuanced and better perspective, focusing on life opportunities and status. And for him, middle class includes small property owners, the skilled workers, and the public officials. If you look at John Urry, he identified the middle class as a significant power within workplace systems and holding a favored position despite lacking ownership of the means of production. Anthony Giddens defined the middle class through the lens of educational qualifications and the technical expertise. The economist, the definition, provided an economic benchmark, and if a household retains more than 1/3 of its income after food and shelter expenses, it can be classified as middle class. Right? That's an interesting definition. That's an economic benchmark. B.B. Misra quantified the middle class as earning between 75% and 125% of the median salary. So he defined this in terms of median salary. What is the generic understanding? See, when you talk about this, they either own the means of production on a smaller scale, right? But not up to the upper class, or they sell the skilled labor. So distinguishing them from unskilled working class. So they're skilled, they sell the skilled labor, but when we talk about the working class, that is unskilled. So here, skilled labor, a better profession like doctors, teachers, engineers, these are skilled labor, right? And the middle class represent a blend of economic stability. They have that education factor, and then the consumerist aspect is also there. Now, perspectives. We can talk about the evolution here. The colonial period, if you see, the middle class in India emerged as a product of colonial policies, of course. That's the beginning. The British educated Indians to serve as intermediaries, right? To act in between, facilitating governance and administration. So that's the initial middle class. The reformers like Rajaram Mohan Roy, K.C. Sen, and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar exemplified this class role in social reforms and modernization also. If you look at post-independence period, democracy, land reform, reservation policies, then because of all these, middle class grew rapidly and significantly. And if you look at Green Revolution, that again increased employment opportunities, contributed to the expansion. And post-liberalization, if you see, the economic liberalization that led to the rise of new middle class that is driven by urbanization, IT, and the private sector. So the salaried middle class become a dominant economic force now. Their number is also high. Okay, now, if you look at the theoretical perspectives, we need to talk about A.R. Desai. A.R. Desai, in fact, highlighted the middle class pivotal role in social reforms and the Indian national movement. We discussed about this in detail, social background of Indian nationalism and everything we discussed. B.B. Misra argued that middle class acted as intermediaries between the British rulers and the Indian masses. And Andre Bethé viewed the Indian middle class as a transitional entity. See, it marked by contradictions and influenced by caste and kinship. Satish Deshpande he criticized the hegemonic nature of middle class in shaping India's socio-political and economic narratives. So any of this, you can take a couple of this. B.B. Misra normally we use, and then A.R. Desai to an extent, Andre Bethé also you can use. Now, if you look at evolution, the sociologist D.L. Seth identified 4 phases. Remember the name Seth, okay, D.L. Seth. Early colonial period, that the middle class initially emerged as tax collectors and intermediaries. And then Indian Renaissance type, that's the growth of modern education, socio-religious reforms shaped the middle class. And then the post-independence, that's because of the access to education, administrative jobs, and policies like land reform that broadened the middle class. And then post-liberalization, you see urban salaried professionals and technocrats emerged as the new middle class, right? So now, if you see, I want to discuss about this rural and urban middle class. What are the similarities? Both exhibit conservative ethos and prioritize materialistic aspirations. Consumerism is high in both the cases. And if you look at the rural middle class, they remain closely tied to agriculture and land ownership, often resistant to change due to historical underdevelopment, sorry. The urban middle class, if you see, is more dynamic, which is shaped by industrialization, education, and global influences. Okay, so you need to make a distinction between rural and urban middle class. If it is a 10 marker, still you need to talk about this. Even if it is a 20 marker, still you need to write everything in a balanced way. So this is enough, this much is enough, okay? And then if you look at the contemporary middle class, so the modern middle class is defined by consumerism, technological advancements, and a blend of globalized and localized cultural values. Both will be followed, right? So you talk about consumerism. One of the key features, the middle class drives the demand for luxury goods, electronics, automobiles. The consumption patterns reflect aspirations for upward mobility. They want to live like the upper class. So aspiration for upward mobility. And that eventually end up in taking more EMIs and loans and other things, and suicides also. Technological proficiency, that often referred to as knowledge class, due to the expertise in IT and the advanced education, knowledge class. Okay, and then cultural duality, to combine Western influences with traditional Indian values. It's exemplified by the adaptation of global brands to local taste. Okay, so you see McDonald's Indian menu. Okay, so that's an example which you can mention. Social change agent, they act as agents of social change, actively participate in movements like, India against corruption, for example, if you want to take, leveraging media, social media, and legal framework to drive the reforms. Okay, now if you look at the impact of globalization, guys, all these are separate topics. Middle class, its impact on globalization, right? So globalization has significantly influenced the middle class. Increased opportunities in education, employment, entrepreneurship. Now you are dealing with the world, not you are dealing with the state or the country. Globalization, the blending of global and local practices, such as adapting Western consumer products to Indian preferences. Apple iPhone, right? So rising concerns about, denationalization and the brain drain concepts. Talk about this. So you won't get time and space to write all these, but most important concepts that I'm discussing, try to incorporate. If it is a 20 marker, try to add more. 10 marker, whatever is necessary that you at least try to add over there. Now, the challenges and the criticisms, gender inequality. So middle class women face superficial and emancipation, gaining freedom in appearance, but remaining bound by traditional roles. Still, they have to perform traditional roles. In fact, double burden is there. They have to go for the work at the same time, household work also. Marriage and motherhood are still emphasized as primary goals for women. Consumerism and alienation. The rise of consumerist culture has led to increased mental health issues and familial stress, and that lead to alienation and that end up in suicides also. What is the reason for rising suicides in middle class? This consumerist culture, aspiration for upward mobility, imitations of upper class people. Okay, then class and caste tensions. See, the caste systems influences waning in rural, in fact, urban areas, but it still shapes social interaction and marriage preferences in all these areas. It's there. Talk about impact of COVID. If required, one line is enough. Economic strain and gendered impact, like women disproportionately affected, or having the burden of unpaid domestic work and increased domestic violence. Many middle class families face financial stress due to the job losses and the reduced income. Right, post-COVID recovery also, the middle class began investing in financial market, reflecting resilience and adaptability. Now, the contributions of the middle class, economic drivers. So, key contributors to private consumption and entrepreneurship act as stabilizing force between upper and lower class. Cultural influences shape societal norms through media. They have that influence, right? So, education and social activism. And what you can say, so guys, my point is, it may not be possible for you to incorporate all, but since I'm giving you 100 points, at least expected to write 50 points in the answer, that itself is going to be a very good answer. So if the question is in general, a big question, 20 marker, you need to try everything in a balanced format. If it is very specific and 10 marker, accordingly, you need to plan. So my conclusion is the Indian middle class, though diverse and evolving, plays a significant role in shaping the nation. It serves as a bridge between tradition and modernity, acting as an agent of social change, but at the same time grappling with internal contradictions. And if you see the globalization and technological advancements continue to reshape the society, the middle class will definitely remain as a crucial determinant of India's socio-economic trajectory. So guys, that's about this session. I hope you got some good value from the session, and I told you already it's a revision session. So if you have already completed this topic, then this session might be helpful for you to revise the things and to check whether you have covered all the topics that I have mentioned. And this, you can take it as a checklist also. If you have not covered, do that, because they can ask you specific questions from each of these topics and cover it systematically. Okay, don't leave anything for chances. So even 1 mark can affect you very badly. So guys, if you like the video, share it with your friends also. And in case if you're looking for mentorship program or test series on sociology or the courses, check the details in the description. If you want the PDF free of course, you can download. The details are in the description. So guys, see you in the next video. Thank you so much.